There's a new tool in the workshop and it's a metal lathe. Of course we can't use the lathe down there on the floor, so it really needs a stand, or rather a cabinet that it can sit on. And because this lathe weighs about 200 kilograms, it should be strong. Here we have the materials, so a piece of kitchen countertop for the top and 2 big slabs of beech hardwood for the frame construction. And with the dimensions of the frame, regular spruce or pine would be plenty strong, but do I really need an excuse for wanting to work with hardwood?
Side note, hardwood is heavy. I think these slabs weigh about 40 kilograms each.
These slabs are about 52 millimeters thick. If you're not using metric, that would be a little over 8/4 stock. Here I have my cut list, and now it's time to lay out all the pieces and trying to exclude all the defects. So I got all the pieces laid out, and good news, it's enough wood. Only this strip here will be left over and one little piece back there.
First, I needed to cut the slabs in half to make them somewhat manageable. And the bigger slab was actually so heavy that my dad even had to help me getting it on the bandsaw. For this work, I really appreciate a powerful bandsaw. It's quite amazing how fast it can cut through that thick hardwood. After that, I could further break down the slabs, and the jigsaw is a little bit slower than the bandsaw. On the bandsaw again, I ripped the pieces to rough width with about 1 centimeter extra. In this rough state of the wood, it's also safer on the bandsaw and it has the thinner saw curve. These are 2 good reasons, but I'd much rather make these cuts on the table saw if they wouldn't be too long for my sliding table. Here you can also see my improvised outfeed table. The clamp handles are the stops for the board. Next, cutting the parts to rough length with about 5 centimeter extra. And then jointing one face and edge. The final thickness is 4 centimeters, so I cut most of that away on the bandsaw so I don't have to plane as much. Then obviously planing. The width of 7 centimeters I cut on the table saw. As usual, almost all pieces have the same dimensions, so the milling process is quite simple.
Alright, now get everything milled down to size 4 by 7 centimeters, and these obviously are the long rails. These are the shorter ones which will connect front and back, and these together with the legs will connect top and bottom. And the legs will have 7 by 7 centimeters, and therefore I always need to glue 2 of these together, but I only have 7. But that's not a problem because I left them as thick as possible, and now I will glue all of them together to a big piece, and this will then be wide enough so I can cut all 4 legs from that. So, time for glue up. Almost flawless except for here because there's no glue squeeze out, but I think this will still hold together. It's a little heavy, a little very heavy. This piece now is 8 centimeters thick and 32 centimeters wide, so it should be easy to get the 4 7 by 7 centimeter legs out of that.
Again, I cut the rough dimensions on the bandsaw. Then jointing 2 faces. and the other faces on the table saw, a real test for my diamond saw blade. It's quite amazing, the surface left from this blade is actually better than from the jointer. Much better, like sanded to 600 grit.
Okay, now I've decided which pieces go where and laid them out roughly, and also marked on every piece where it will be in the end. And I also took the time and marked everywhere where will be a groove, how wide it will be. And I also marked all the tenon locations, and tenants are what I will use for the joinery. To cut the joinery, I'll use the Pantorouter, and I already made myself a custom big tenon template for this project. And I also already cut the first mortises with it and learned a few things. For example, I shouldn't have made this quite as thin as it easily breaks. And also, as these two mortises meet, the moment the router bit breaks through here, it really wants to pull itself in, and that's also where this mistake is coming from. So I have to be a little more careful when I'm routing up here and when the router bit breaks through. These were the mortises for the top rails and stiles, and these will be flush with the top, and the ones on the bottom will be offset by about 3 centimeters. And therefore I just need to move the stop by 3 centimeters. Next, cutting the tenants. Alright, so far so good. I got all the big tenons cut, so time for a dry assembly. Alright, everything fits together. And even though it's only dry assembled, it's already very rigid. But as you can see, they don't quite fit together yet, and that's because not only the mortises intersect in the leg, but also the tenons. And I knew that would happen when I designed it, and now I could cut the tenons shorter, but then I would have cut them shorter to begin with. So instead I'm just going to bevel this edge here, like so. Okay, and now everything fits together as it's supposed to. Next, cutting the joints for the cross pieces that go in here. Here I'll use a triple mortise and tenon joint, which I'll cut with this Pantorouter template. And I'll do that instead of a mortise like so, because a bigger mortise across the grain will cut most of the grain away, which gives the whole piece its stability. And by making 3 smaller mortises along the grain, won't weaken the structure as much. The test joint for this already came out perfect. I marked the exact location of the mortises, and I just need to line that up with the center mark on the table. Got it further assembled and everything fits as it's supposed to. The last pieces missing are these vertical ones, but I can't cut their joinery yet because they extend over both pieces here. And to cut the mortises, I first need to glue that together. But before gluing anything together, I need to cut all the grooves for the panels that will go in there.
I cut the grooves with a series of table saw cuts. By flipping the piece, the groove will end up in the center.
Okay, all pieces are finished with all the grooves and joinery. I've got all the panels, and I also pre-sanded them and also sanded all the parts that would be difficult to sand when everything is assembled. So yeah, time for the first glue ups. Just to be safe, another dry assembly. fits perfectly. Perfect. Alright, both side frames are done. Now come the top and bottom frames. Okay, now both these and these frames are glued up. And this is how it looks roughly assembled. Everything still fits, which is pretty good. And now next come these vertical pieces here, and they of course need some more mortise and tenon joints. Now I skipped the rest of the dry assembly, but everything still fits as it's supposed to. Very nice.
The big glue up was a little more difficult than I thought, and it almost didn't go together. The big clamps really saved my work here.
That was tough. But it's all together now. Whee! If that wouldn't have worked, I could have probably scrapped all these parts here. Now, just for fun, I can't change anything now, but let's see if it's square. Oh yes, it is. Oh, hopefully it still fits the legs. Alright, all glued up now. And who said you can't build bigger things in a small workshop? Well, there you go. Only now I would say I have a space problem.
Next, cutting the top to size. Therefore, I had to rotate my table saw and needed my mom as an assistant.
To cover up the edge of the particle board, I glue on a piece of oak as edge banding.
Then the really boring part of finishing. Fortunately, video editing can cover a 2-day process in just a few seconds.
Now I put it upside down to install a leveling feet. And finding the right leveling feet was a little difficult because the ones that would be suited for the job would have cost about 25 euros per piece. So instead I spent 25 euros on M16 hardware and make them myself. And this is how they will go together. So the bolt sticks in the foot, then a washer that I drilled holes into, then a nut, and I tighten them as much as I can. Also, the head from the bolt does not bottom out in the hole, so the pressure from the weight will go through the bolt, then to the washer, and that will be spread over the area of the washer to the foot. Then I drilled a hole all the way through the nut and the bolt, and a nail through it will prevent it from ever getting loose again. Now another nut, and the steel plate that somebody made for us, and another nut. Then just doing that 3 times again, and we're ready to put them on. I already drilled holes, but I also need a hexagonal hole that will fit the nut and prevent it from spinning. And to make them, I made this template that I can align on the leg and clamp it. The router with the guide bushing will then cut the right size hole. Then mounting the plate. Here now I can thread in the foot. and precisely adjust the height. Of course, when there's a lot of weight on it, I can't turn it that easily, so then I grab it on the nut with the pin through it, and when I'm at the right position, I lock this nut, and because the one in the foot is also locked, this jams it to the plate, and the plate is mounted to the foot, and now everything is solid.
I also mounted the top with strips from the inside while it was upside down. The drawers I made in another video, which I linked in the video description, so I won't cover them here.
Then the bottom shelves that just sit on some strips. And now the doors. I first wanted to use these type of hinges, but they unfortunately don't work with doors that are flush with the front surface. So then I thought about these cup hinges, I think you call them, but they unfortunately don't work because my doors are too thin, and then drilling the hole for the cap, I don't know, the point of the drill bit would come through the front, so they also didn't work. So then I just went with piano hinges. Ah, perfect. And magnetic latches to keep the doors shut. And now it's done. Man, that was a cool project, and I really couldn't be more satisfied with this result. In terms of woodworking, this is easily, by far, my best project so far. No doubts there. And it's exactly what I wanted it to be. A really solid cabinet. It's not leveled out on the floor yet, so can wiggle back and forth, but it's one solid piece. And that's exactly what it needs to be for being a stand for a metal lathe. And speaking of metal lathe, now it's really time to lift that up there.
With a hook in the ceiling and a good old hoist, that wasn't all that difficult. Much easier than bringing it down the spiral staircase. And then my dad and I started to set everything up.
Well, I have no idea how to end this video now because I already said everything about this project, so yeah, lathe project done. And 2 big slabs of beech hardwood for the frame construction, and with the dimensions of the frame, regular spruce or pine would be plenty strong, but do I really need an excuse for wanting to work with hardwood? And now I will glue all of them together to a big piece, and this will then be man, that was a cool project, and I really couldn't be more satisfied.